Hello dear listener, please subscribe to our channel. Enjoy watching. When you grow older, you start to perceive everyday reality differently than you did 10 or 15 years ago. You begin to treasure each day you've lived, fully aware that the time allotted by the Almighty is gradually diminishing. Time itself seems to fly swiftly. In childhood, it stretched out slowly, and every summer felt like a lifetime. But now in the twilight of one's years, time whizzes by like an express train outside the window. Indeed, our lives can be compared to a train journey. Upon birth, you find your place in a carriage. A train starts moving slowly at first, then gains speed, and eventually it's racing. The scenery outside changes. People come and go from the carriage. Some stay for a long time, while others disembark at their stations. Some are lucky and their fellow travelers accompany them to the final stop. I am now 63 years old, and my train has already passed the second to last station, rapidly approaching the terminus. Involuntarily, at my age, you become a philosopher. I was fortunate with my fellow passengers. I met Paulina, my wife, at a restaurant where I went with my friend. Paulina was with another guy at the time and didn't pay much attention to me initially. I don't remember what we were celebrating that night, but going home alone was not an option, so I recruited my neighbor from the stairwell. At that time, I was a third-year student at the Engineering Institute, while Paulina had just finished school. The evening passed quickly, and we all dispersed to our respective homes or friends' places. But the beautiful blonde had found a place in my heart. Of fate cannot be fooled. We met Paulina again some time later, and eventually we became a couple. We got married during my 4th year of college. Just a year later, a son Euro was born, and after another 8 years, a daughter Julia appeared. After graduating from college, I joined the army. 3 years later, I applied for an extension and continued to serve. Because the military service didn't bother me, I made progress and rapidly climbed the career ladder. I served in various places, the Middle East, Germany, Africa, and eventually, I completed my service in the Odessa region. I reached the rank of colonel and was honorably discharged from my position as the Army's Chief of Intelligence. I adapted quickly to civilian life. My initial profession was in demand, and I started working in manufacturing. Within 3 years, I became the chief mechanic, and 2 years later, I became the chief engineer at the techno device factory. Excellent. Until recently, I continued working at the factory while Paulina worked at the regional hospital. She too had advanced in her career and held the position of the head nurse. As children grew up, our son graduated from the Ministry of Internal Affairs Institute and our daughter from the university. They started their own families. By this time, I had reached retirement age and finally retired. Paulina, on the other hand, continued to work even though she was already eligible for retirement. I must say, I was lucky with my wife in every sense. She was one of those women who age very slowly. Mature in her years, she looked significantly younger than her age, and men still cast admiring glances her way. She always dressed tastefully with minimal makeup, a stylish haircut, enticing curves, everything that makes a woman attractive to the opposite sex. I won't say I fared worse, but men age faster. But the service, injuries, and other factors took their toll. But all of this didn't make us any better or younger. I couldn't be called a withered stump either. Out of habit from my army days, I woke up early, went for a run, did some calisthenics as much as I could manage. I may have put on a little weight, but overall, I still had a decent appearance. Additionally, I played the guitar and accordion quite well. What else did I need to feel happy? Having lived with one woman for so many years, I had no doubts that I would spend my whole life with her. Throughout our life together, there was no one better for me than her. I looked at other women, of course. A man is a man, after all. But I never strayed. My conscience is clear. Yes, there were times when I came home drunk. The service dictated its rules. But I never caused a scene or harmed my family. We had our disagreements, as any couple does. But we always found a compromise and quickly made amends. Yes, that's how it was until recently. Then my Paulina began to change. Well, it seemed to have started long before, but I cocooned in my happy life, simply didn't notice these changes. But perhaps I didn't want to notice them. Everything in my life was satisfactory. Meanwhile, my wife was altering even in appearance. Her heels grew higher, skirts and dresses became shorter. Her hairstyles became more glamorous, and makeup entered the picture. I attributed it all to age. What a fool I was. But believing that my wife was clinging to her youth and trying to delay the onset of maturity. Even to myself, I condescendingly joked, thinking, look at her, acting like a young girl. But as it turned out, she was quite serious about it. She started attending various professional development courses just before retirement, going to seminars and taking on night shifts. But my head was not yet itching from budding horns. As they say, the husband is always the last to know. Everything for me ended at the New Year's corporate party. The New Year's corporate party? We were supposed to attend together. I'm not particularly fond of those glamorous gatherings, but this time Paulina persuaded me. As it later turned out, it wasn't without reason. I can't remember why, but I was running late. I called my wife, apologized, and promised to arrive shortly. We were celebrating outside the city at a recreation center. Rooms were even booked for those who wanted to continue the party until morning. I arrived in my car and had no intention of drinking. I do enjoy a drink. I like the process, unhurried and deliberate. But with a cigar, quiet conversation with an intellectual companion, sipping alcohol, and without the deafening music and hysterical female laughter that had never appealed to me. I parked my car and climbed the snow-covered steps. Its warmth and the scent of food hit me in the face. People were having a great time. I had missed the official part and entered right into the heart of the celebration. I scanned the room. Paulina was nowhere to be seen. I spotted her colleague, someone I knew slightly, and made my way toward her, politely weaving my way through the dancers. Paulina's friend, Marina, was energetically dancing with some red-faced fellow resembling a boletus mushroom. I stood to the side, not to interrupt, and when their lively dance ended, I gently touched the woman on the shoulder. "Hello," a picture as I asked very politely, "Where's Paulina? I'm running late and I can't seem to find her." Any noise was being made. Sounds were coming from the room. The door was slightly ajar and I saw the whole scene. Paulina was on her knees in front of a man I didn't recognize, and she was diligently moving her head. The stranger tilted his head back, closing his eyes, surrendering entirely to the pleasure he was receiving. They were both dressed, except for the man's lowered trousers, which he was holding up with one hand. They were so engrossed in their activity that they didn't notice anything around them. I stood there like a statue, not doing anything. These two things are sexually quetzed. 20 years ago, I might have reacted with anger and thrown them both out of the window without a second thought, no need for words. But now all I felt was a deep sense of shame and disgust. I was ashamed of my wife, whom I had loved all my life, and who was betraying me in cold blood and cynicism. At her age, to be on her knees, I banged on the door with a deliberate loud bang. The last thing I saw was the man frantically tugging at his fly and pinning his dignity. I heard him moan in pain. I left the room and walked quickly down the hall. The fact that I was no longer married was clear, but I could not calculate my further actions. One thing I knew for sure, I had to get out of here. I was afraid that in anger, I could make a mess of things. Paulina, smacking her lips, stood before my eyes. I couldn't even find the words to call her names. Everything I knew was too weak a characterization for my ex-wife. I went back to the hall and sat down at the first table I could find. My legs wouldn't hold up. I decided to recover a little and leave. A few minutes later, Paulina's lover came into the hall. He wrinkled with pain and sat down not far from me. I'm not an infantile institute girl, and I have more than one extreme situation under my belt. Gradually, my body began to withdraw. Little by little, my head was clearing up. I accepted the situation and began to calculate options for behavior. There was a desire to smash his face, but I dismissed that thought. Nothing would change from the fact that I was going to smash his scoreboard. They'll call the police and send me to jail, and they'll gloat. Well, maybe I'll take my breath away. That's all. But it was difficult for me to understand Paulina's behavior and her reaction to the fight. But usually, wives are always on the side of lovers. That they were lovers, I had no doubt. There was another important factor. Paulina did everything voluntarily. It's not constructive to have a showdown with Paulina for the public's amusement. All sympathy would be on the poor woman's side. So she got a little naughty, who doesn't? At that moment, Paulina appeared in the hall. She absent-mindedly looked around the room. Marina immediately jumped up to hers. She grabbed her by the elbow and something with heat began to say in her ear. Paulina saw me. She hesitantly moved in my direction, but I stood up and walked to the exit. That's okay, her lover will give her a ride home or wherever they want her to go. Having thrown on my coat, I descended the stairs and settled behind the wheel. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. Paulina rushed onto the porch and began to shout something. But the engine was roaring and the windows were closed. So the woman was yelling in vain. I hadn't even exited the base's gates when my mobile phone came to life. my beloveds lit up on the screen. I felt like throwing up. I declined the call, but Paulina continued to call again and again. Finally, I simply turned off the phone. I didn't want to go home and stop to spend the night at a roadside motel. Just the thought of seeing her with her painted lips made me nauseous. No more confrontations. What's done is done. I didn't know how much time the Lord had left for me, but I was determined to spend it without Paulina. Oh, compromises. She had willingly done it all, and from what I could see, with youthful enthusiasm. I didn't want to waste my remaining years on this mess. I tried to reassure myself. You're not the first, you won't be the last. I'll get through somehow. The kids are grown up. Grandchildren. Well, let them figure that out for themselves. One thing was both amusing and embarrassing. At such a mature age, your wife cheats on you. Who could I tell, lest I become a laughing stock? I arrived home in the morning. Paulina was busy in the kitchen, but upon hearing me, she came out into the hallway. Vitalik, have you gone mad? Where have you been? I was worried sick. I got the kids up, called the police and the morgues. What happened? Why did you run off in front of my colleagues? Paulina bombarded me with so many questions that, for some reason, it made me laugh. It seems she had no idea that I had seen her playing the flute with a stranger. And all I had seen were her lips. Our boss, Arthur, really wanted to meet you. And you ran away. The respectable man, and you're acting like a kid. Has the rein slipped from your hands? Paulina persisted. Aren't you ashamed? Yes, the best defense is a good offense. Honestly, I felt like punching her lying mouth to shut it forever. But I held back. I was curious about what happened next. I pushed Paulina aside, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself some coffee. I looked out of the window. The day promised to be sunny. The city was slowly waking up from its nightly slumber. The lights and colorful garlands were being extinguished, gathering strength for New Year's Eve. The streets filled with perpetually rushing cars. That the last day of the old year was beginning.
Are you even listening to me? I want to invite him to our New Year's celebration.
Who is him?
Our boss. His wife passed away 6 months ago, and he's alone now. Let him welcome the new year with us.
Paulina beamed like a brass samovar. Appeal. Do New Year's as a family holiday. We'll have children and grandchildren. Why on earth do we need your boss here? I decided to tease her a bit. There couldn't possibly be any talk of celebrating the new year together. Don't be selfish. He's going through a tough time right now, and he needs our support. Paulina couldn't calm down. Why don't his kids invite him? My phrase sounded ambiguous. Suddenly, I understood. Her lover was none other than the head doctor, Arthur. What a scoundrel. She had no shame bringing him into my home like this. She wasn't afraid of me or the children. What if the kids know about her adventures? My heart sank at the thought. But weren't those my kids? After what I had seen, I had legitimate doubts. Maybe she had been fooling around behind my back all her life. This thought made me feel sick. In the morning, my son Yuri called a meeting. Subordinates were sluggishly reporting on completed cases, hovering in their thoughts somewhere far away from the chief's office. Brady took off his glasses and looked at Major Dekovichny with his myopic eyes. But what do we have on unidentified corpses? We have information on all but the November 1st one, Comrade Colonel. Well, the one from the accident on the ring road without documents. Everything was burned in the accident, the gas tank exploded. The body was badly burned except for the ring. There's no sign of him. It's an expensive ring, platinum with a diamond. He must have been rich. Igor?
No one contacted you about a missing person? From the moment of the accident until today, no one.
Fiction, maybe he was a stranger and got into the car by accident.
I must have been rich.
No one contacted you about a missing person. From the moment of the accident until today, no one. Maybe he was a stranger and got into the car by accident.
Lowered his eyes as if he thought he had something to do with the accident.
That's I see. Everyone's thoughts are on the upcoming New Year's Eve. Well, we'll get together after the weekend. Write a report and close the case. Dismissed. But the colonel leaned back in his chair. It's the last day of the passing year was just beginning and did not bode well.
Colonel, allow me a question.
Major Dekovichny suddenly raised his voice.
Brady looked questioningly at his colleague.
Can we let people go home early? Today is New Year's Eve. After all, everyone froze and did not hurry to leave the office of the chief.
Deary grinned to himself. At them devils.
All right, work today until 16 o'clock, then only on duty.
But Mound said Happy New Year. He sat for a while gathering his thoughts, then he dialed his home number.
His wife answered at once. Natasha, what time did my mother invite us?
He patted the pockets of his tunic in search of cigarettes.
Much as usual, at 9 o'clock in the evening, she asked us to bring mineral water and a cake.
Natasha was doing something in the kitchen, and Yuri could hear the clinking of dishes. I dropped off the cake yesterday, didn't I? He was surprised. Why the second one? There will be someone else there besides us. Answered his wife. I wonder who. Yuri's mood finally soured. Usually only the closest people gathered for New Year's Eve. His father and his mother, he and his wife and his sister and her husband. Who else was invited? And why? Okay. They'll be there after 4 o'clock. I'll buy everything. The colonel went out. Usually at these gatherings, he and his father talked about various topics. They couldn't see each other much in everyday life. Work sucked them in. But on New Year's Eve, when everyone, tired of the fun, went to bed, he and his father talked until the morning. Since some time, these night conversations on New Year's Eve became, as it were, a ritual of their lives. Yuri loved his father more than his mother. He was even afraid to admit it to himself. All his childhood he spent next to his father in the soldiers' barracks. His father even took him on training exercises, much to his mother's displeasure. He joined the police force on his father's advice. Biri told his father about his girlfriend before he told his mother. Putting out his cigarette, the colonel dialed his father's number. Strange, his cell phone was off. He dialed his mother. She answered quickly. Hi, Mom. Happy New Year. Yuri sensed that his mother was in a bad mood. He didn't ask her about it. There was no telling what might have happened. I don't know, she answered uncertainly. He'd gone somewhere in the morning. Hutchins, Natasha said that you invited someone else for New Year's Eve. Yuri leaned back in his chair. It will be my boss, Artur Yakovlevich. Mother spoke in a strange, unfamiliar voice. His wife died recently, and we've decided to support him. Yuri hummed in surprise. And what? The father agreed. His mother mumbled something vague and changed the subject. I asked Natasha to buy something. I know we'll bring everything by. Yuri disconnected. After the conversation with his mother left an unpleasant residue, so he pressed the selector and called his deputy. Gradually his work distracted him from unpleasant thoughts. At 5:30, Yuri arrived home. Having rested after work, he huddled with his wife in the kitchen, then called his children, congratulated them on New Year's Eve, and began to get ready for a visit. At exactly 9 in the evening, Yuri and Natasha arrived at his parents' apartment. The door was opened by his sister. Come in. We're a little early this time. Julia kissed her brother's neck and hugged Natasha. Her mother came out of the back of the apartment. Hello, son, she hugged Yuri. It seemed to him for a moment that his mother had been crying not long ago. Strange, they rarely quarreled. I don't see Daddy, Yuri said in a deliberately cheerful voice, trying to see his father's silhouette in the depths of the hallway. He will be here later, stuttered the mother. Come in. Natasha and Julia went into the kitchen, while Yuri entered the living room and stopped in surprise at the doorway. At the New Year's table, where his father usually sat, there was an unfamiliar man. But for a while, they silently stared at each other. Meet my son, his mother said in an overly sweet voice. This is Artur Yakovlevich, Arthur. Meet my eldest son, Yuri, the mother introduced. Yuri looked around. He'd never seen his mother like this before. The man stood up and extended his hand. But the women and Julia's husband, Demai, entered the room. Everyone started taking their seats at the table. Arthur poured the drinks, but as everyone want, his mother chirped and began serving salad to the guest. None. Was Dad after all? Yuri asked with bewilderment, not understanding what was happening. Are we not waiting for him? Shouldn't we wait for him? Dad should be coming. Julia declared loudly, we'll start without him. Drinks were poured, and everyone picked up their glasses. I propose a toast to our acquaintance. Artur Yakovlevich unexpectedly spoke up. Everyone drank except Yuri. He placed his glass on the table and looked intently at his mother. What's going on? Where's Dad, and why is this man making the first toast? Yuri spoke slowly, enunciating each word. His mother blushed and for some reason glanced at her daughter. We didn't want to tell you, Julia began, but Dad had a fight with Mom, got angry, and left. We don't know where he is, and his phone is turned off. Is that true? Yuri shifted his gaze to his mother.
Children, your father has something on his mind. He said he's gonna divorce me after the New Year holidays. She wiped away tears with a napkin.
Yura, let your parents sort it out themselves.
After all, it's still New Year's.
What do you mean, got angry?
He's your husband after all.
Why me not tell him something?
Yura, don't ruin our holiday. Dad won't disappear. He'll come back.
I don't know what's going on with you, but I believe that without Dad, it's not a holiday. or leaving. Natasha, let's go.
Yura, wait. It's not nice. What will our guest think? His mother pleaded with folded hands. Arthur Yakovlevich sat in silence, pretending that these family disputes didn't concern him. But Yuri had already stepped into the corridor and was helping his wife put on her coat. Julia joined their mother. "You've ruined everything," she hissed angrily. "You're just like Dad. You don't want to understand anything." Yuri didn't understand what he had ruined, but he knew one thing for sure. You couldn't celebrate the new year without your father. I knew that Paulina would resist with all her might, but she wouldn't vacate the apartment quickly. At least because she had nowhere else to go. Perhaps to her lover's place. But even that wasn't certain. I needed to think about where to stay for the first while. I have a house in the village, left to me by my grandmother. However, I haven't been there in a long time, and its condition is uncertain. It might have fallen into disrepair without proper upkeep. There's only one way to find out. Rent a place for a couple of weeks and deal with problems as they arise. I parked and started browsing apartment listings on my iPhone. Money isn't an issue, so I didn't dwell on the prices. I considered calling the kids, but then I thought it would be best not to upset them just before the New Year's holidays. Paulina had stirred up this mess. She could deal with it herself. In any case, the kids would eventually find out what had happened, and how they take it will be up to them. Besides, I felt embarrassed about talking to the kids. Just think about it. Their old folks are getting divorced. Well, exactly old, but still. However, it didn't seem like Paulina was bothered by such trivial matters. She found love, even if it was at a mature age. There was nothing to be done about it. For the family, why and for what? Especially when it seems like there is no family left. If you enjoyed this story, please like and leave a comment. It's important for us and will help promote this video. Thank you for watching us.